Hello, and welcome to Counterculture. Google announced Project Stadia. They really honed in on emphasizing how many people out there have a smart connected device with Chrome. I think they said it was over 2 billion people. Um, and to me, um, they wouldn't spend that much time talking about the numbers like that if they didn't if they weren't going towards that audience. So really, Google Stadia is more for the casual market, those that don't have a console or PCs strong enough to play newer games. So when I think about Google Stadia, I think about my best friend. My best friend, she's not the biggest gamer, but she's really into watching Twitch streamers play Fortnite. And because of that, she has gotten more into gaming. But she only has a smartphone and a really basic laptop from like 7 years ago, and she's been going back and forth with me on considering buying a console or not, or buying a strong enough PC so she can play Fortnite reasonably well, or at least better than how she's playing it on her phone. And I think Google Stadia is going to be the perfect solution for her because there's not so much of a financial investment with Google Stadia. There's no barrier to entry really because she already has the smartphone to play it. Really, the only barrier that she has now is going to be her internet speed, which I'm not gonna lie, that's a really big barrier because just with ISPs, some of them imposing data caps, some of them really gouging their pricing on data. It's just that's going to be the biggest barrier. But compared to a console, I mean that's like a fraction of what the barriers to entry for a console are, because for a console you have to, one, you have to buy the console, which is usually a $200 to $400 investment. Then you have to buy the game, or in Fortnite's case, or any other free to play game, you don't have to buy the game. Some, I suppose, require a subscription to PlayStation Plus, I suppose. But then on top of that console purchase, you also have to worry about your internet speeds just for downloading games. And I know you could purchase retail, but even then, you're still having to download a large portion of the game anyway. It doesn't really make much of a difference. If you pick up a game, you're still going to have a really lengthy patch. And for free to play games, there's usually not a disc based version to begin with. And even still, those require updates because they're games as a service. So they're always getting updated with new content. So, really, internet speed is going to be a problem no matter how you shake it. But regardless, going back to just streaming platforms and the pushback to that, I don't think gamers understand. This is not for you. It's for my best friend. It's for my parents. It's for people in between that age. It's really, I feel like this is catering more towards the people that are in their late 20s to 50s. It really is, because think about it. With the barrier to entry lower, they're really catering to a more casual market. People that aren't so well versed in the gaming sphere, they're not going to care if there's lag in their game, really. At least at first, they're not going to care. Um, they're not going to realize that there's lag in their game, most likely. But I mean, for the general populace, I feel like they're not going to be as concerned about the quality gap between streaming something and actually having a downloaded copy, like a locally stored game. And it's going to get people's foot in the door. It's going to get people switching gears, I suppose, because like, take for instance my mom. She plays a lot of mobile games. But if Google can do what they say and get, Stadia games featured on the Google Play storefront, that opens up the gap to all these AAA developers, to all the indie publishers. Because it's going to allow them to get their games in front of people that would never, ever think about purchasing a AAA game. So I think purely from that standpoint, like, if you don't think about anything else, just think about with Project Stadia, with PlayStation Now, with Microsoft's xCloud, you're giving the mainstream market the ability to play these games and get into the gaming ecosystem. And I feel like a lot of people aren't thinking like this, but I feel like people think Project Stadia is like a competitor to streaming platforms. It is not a competitor to Sony, to Nintendo. It's kind of a competitor to Microsoft because they're switching away from their hardware and more focusing on their software. So it kind of is. Google Stadia is really going to perhaps enable more purchases of hardware, if you think about it. Because if there's someone in their late 20s who is just now getting into video games through Project Stadia, they're going to be like, okay, my internet's not the best. It's barely hitting the minimum requirements. I want an even better experience, so I'm going to buy a console. I'm going to buy dedicated hardware now that I know for a fact that this is something that I want, that this is something that I would actually play. So I think Project Stadia is going to enable more purchases than not. And I feel like that's going to just accelerate the community as a whole. I feel like once Stadia launches, from then on to the next year or two, it's going to just bolster the gaming community. I really see it as just a net good. Like, I feel like there's no way the gaming community can lose from having this platform as an option, because I'm like 2000% positive it's going to take two more generations until dedicated hardware starts to fall away. And I just feel like people are just not understanding Google's vision, and they're not understanding Microsoft's vision with xCloud. I think people need to realize that this is not for the gamer. This is not for the hardcore at all. This is for people like my best friend. This is for people like my parents. And that's who you got to think about when you're thinking about Project Stadia. I don't know why I keep calling it Project Stadia. It's just Google Stadia now. It's not a project. This is a full-on thing. They've invested too much money for this to be just a project, like a side thing. And that's another thing. Why are so many people thinking that Google's going to shelve this in 2 years? I feel like looking at Google's past service shutdowns isn't a good indicator of how this is going to fail or succeed or shut down, because a lot of Google's projects that have shut down in recent memory. Let's take for instance Inbox. I feel like for things like that, it's more of consolidation now. Like they're trying things out, they're seeing how it works, they're seeing how many people are using it, and they're taking the best features from that, or at least what they believe are the most utilized features from that, and taking it over to their main app, the Gmail app, and consolidating. I feel like a lot of things like what was it, Google Duo, that shut down recently. There are projects that they do. They have tons of projects that they do. And eventually they'll realize, is this working out or is this not? If it's not, let's consolidate and move on to another project. But with Google Stadia, they are putting some serious financial backing into it. They wouldn't open an entire gaming division. They wouldn't hire Phil Harrison and Jade Raymond. They wouldn't hire two major players in the gaming space. They wouldn't hire two major players in the gaming space if they weren't committed to this project. There's just no way. There's no way that they would do that. It makes no sense. No matter how big your company is, no matter how small your company is, it does not make sense to put so much investment into a project if it's just going to be that, just a project. No, they're definitely putting some serious backing into this, and I feel like they're confident in this product. They see the market gap. They see, the 2 billion plus people that have a Chrome device, and they see the 170 million people that have dedicated hardware from this generation. That's a 1.5 billion plus gap. There's exponential amounts of opportunity for a company to get into the space and get more people playing higher end games. And Google really realizes that. And I feel like that's really forward thinking of them. And they have to recognize, I'm sure they have a dedicated team of researchers that have done the analytics and have looked at, what's the average speed in each state of the US, of each country in the world. I'm sure they've looked at that data to see internet speeds, and they realize that not everyone's going to have the minimum speeds required to play Google Stadia in 2019. they're looking at this as like a long-term pillar in their lineup of services and products. This is more evergreen, I suppose. This is more strategic than anything because, well, not a lot of people are going to have the internet to required to use this right now. In 10 years, who knows how many people are going to have access to the minimum required specs to stream something on Google Stadia. And that's something that they're considering. It's evident. So they're thinking about this more in like what's going on in 10 years in the space. We want to be at the forefront. We want to be ahead of the curve. That's what Google's thinking, and that's what they're doing. They're ahead of the curve right now. I mean, this is the to me this is a very natural evolution of streaming services, of gaming, and I can only consider this a net good for developers, for publishers, for consumers, because this is going to push more people into the community. Why would you not want more people in your community? You know what I mean? You want more people coming in because it's going to bolster consumption, it's going to bolster financial gain, it's going to enable developers to pump out more products, more quality products, I should say. Hopefully, more quality products at least. That's just going to bolster the community. And there's going to be issues such as properly monetizing services, properly regulating loot boxes. There's going to be a lot of issues in the next 10 years. But there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I'm so eager to learn what's going to work out, what services are going to stay. Is PlayStation now going to is it going to become a high profile pillar like Google Stadia and Microsoft's xCloud seem poised to be, or is it going to fall back? Is Nintendo going to launch their own streaming service, or are they going to hand off that to Microsoft, to Google? Are they going to split it, or are they going to just say no, we're not doing that at all, ever? You know, and that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out as well, because Microsoft and Nintendo have been really keen on partnering up this past year and a half. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how the gaming landscape changes from now until 2030. I'm very eager to see what happens. And you know what's that going to mean for VR? You know what I mean? Are we going to reach a point where we can stream VR? I don't know. That's going to be an interesting case. There's a lot of issues with motion sickness in relation to VR when the quality's not at a certain level. And I feel like gamers need to relax on their fears because it's not all doom and gloom. The gaming community is just going to become better as a result of streaming service platforms. And I'm going to be interested to see what other players decide to enter as time goes on. I believe Walmart's trying to gear up a streaming service. We'll see how that works out. I think out of all of them, that will be the one that fails, because I feel like Walmart's usually late to the curve on a lot of online internet based services. So we'll see how this all shapes out. I'm really excited and I can't wait. But thank you for taking the time to listen to me kind of ramble about streaming services because it's been all in my head lately and I really wanted to talk about it. So thank you for watching or listening, and I'll hopefully see you again next time.